Today we're here to show you how to use the WeVideo resource in order to have your kids create podcasts. The first thing I want to mention is that podcasting is really a writing assignment, and writing requires some prep work. So we always encourage our teachers when they want to do podcasting to have their kids script out what they're going to say. You can do podcasting in any content area. It can be a debate. It can be a self-reflection. It can be a tutorial or instruction podcast. It can be an interview between two characters, or you have a host with a guest. So there's lots of ways to spin a podcast creation. But before they do any kind of recording, we want them to be ready, and we want them to focus on content first, not the digital resource. The digital resource is just a tool to accomplish the end goal, which is a finished product, a podcast. So we really want them to plan it out and think about the content they're grappling with. So you can create a really quick storyboard of any kind, and we have them to share with you, and you can adjust it however you'd like to fit the needs of your class. But this is just a quick little storyboard that I threw together for an interview type of podcast between a host and a guest. And so you have a couple of parts about podcasts that kids need to understand. It is a genre of writing. So there are certain components of a podcast that are a requirement. They need some music and sound effects, and they need an intro and an outro. And that's just like an introduction and a conclusion in an essay. But in the intro, they're going to have their background music, but they're also going to introduce their guest, introduce the topic, introduce the podcast and the episode of the podcast as well. So in this, you give them a couple of examples, and on the right here is the actual host doing the intro speech to start the show. And then because this is interview style, we have the host here asking a question, so they'll develop their questions here with the guest writing a response that's pre-planned. They can often do a lot of off-cuff additions as they're going, but we want them to have the foundation that has that content already ready to go. And again, you can decide how many questions, or if it's even interview question style, but they must have an outro, which is the conclusion of a podcast that thanks the guest for being there, maybe pitches the podcast by telling what the next episode is about, anything like that for the outro. And we have some sample ideas for them to think about. And then they write out their outro, and then they're ready to record. So once they're ready to record, kids need to get into WeVideo. They will use their Google credentials to sign up for an account. You can use WeVideo yourself. We have a district license for it. But once you get your account going, you just go to wevideo.com and you're going to click Login right here. And you will choose, usually it'll ask you to sign in with Google, and then you choose your credentials and you land on this page. For teachers, you have a couple of options. For this purpose, just as a tutorial, we're going to do personal. And this is what your kids will more than likely do unless you create a class within WeVideo. They're going to come up here. This is the dashboard, and they're going to come up to create new. And they're going to come down to podcast and choose that. If they get this box that pops up, they just name where they want to land their project in their storage within WeVideo. And the first thing it wants you to do is record their voiceover. And that's their script that they've already pre-written. And that script, you want to have them record it first, because they're going to want to play with the music and the sound effects, because that's the fun part of all of this. But we always tell them, you've got to do the hard work first, which is to record their script, which is the content, because content always takes center stage over anything else. So they're going to, once they're ready to start, they've got their script ready to go, they're going to click record. They'll do a little brief 3-second countdown. It'll tell you when it's ready to go, tell kids to take a deep breath, and when you see that timer start ticking up, that's when they can start talking. And here's some things you'll know, and you probably already know about kids. We're all very super sensitive about how our voices sound in an audio playback. So kids get a little embarrassed, they get a little nervous about it, they're gonna make mistakes. And just in natural conversation, we make mistakes in our speech. when we're talking to one another. And podcasts don't need to sound too staged. So just encourage your kids to record without stopping. Let them know that this is not just a recording tool, it's also an editing tool. So if they make a huge mistake, tell them just to keep going. Tell them to pause for a second or two, get themselves together, and then just pick up where they messed up and keep going. Because once it drops into the timeline, I'll show you how they can edit out pieces where they've really messed up. So we're going to just click stop right here. And then it gives them a chance to preview. Kids will take a deep breath, and when you see that, if they just really want to start all over, they can click record again. And if they're happy with it and know that they can cut out some of their mistakes, they can click save. And you'll notice that this recording drops into your timeline right here, and it's called voiceover. And you'll see that it's right here where the recording dropped in. So this is the slider, and the slider is where we're going to cut out some mistakes. So if I had a big long pause right there, I've got the track selected. I have this blue square line around this right here. I'm going to click the scissors right here. This slider tells me where to cut. And let's say I just want to cut a tiny bit out, so I'm going to inch it over just a little bit more, and I'm going to cut it again. And then I'm going to click on that middle piece that I want to delete, and I'm just going to hit the delete. And then I can just bring that to meet the other part of the voiceover. And that's as easy as it is to correct any kind of mistakes within their voiceover. And they can do this with any kind of audio or sound effect that they drop in to their timeline. So I want to show you that as well. For a podcast, they do not need this video track. So we're just going to ignore it because it just stays here as a standard. But we do need this audio track. But we also need maybe a second audio track because we're going to show you how to include some background music for your intro and outro. But on top of that, we want to show you how they can include the sound effects within it. So right here is where we're going to drop it in. But right here is our audio tab. And what's great about the audio tab is that these are stock audio sounds that are licensed by WeVideo. There's no worry about copyright infringement. They are for you to use and for your kids to use without any worry about infringement of copyright. So once they click on audio right here, they're going to come up to this search bar, and they first want to find some background music because intros and outros have that background music as part of the genre as well. So maybe they need to pick something that matches the tone or the mood of what they're talking about. Let's say it's a scary book. So they're just going to type the word scary. And it brings up a lot of things they can preview. And here are all the choices, and they can keep scrolling down to find other options. So I'm going to click on one, and it's not in my timeline yet. It's previewing over here, and we can listen to it. And if you don't like that, you can try something else. So once you find what you like, you're going to click on it and drag it into this audio timeline and just drop it in. So there's our audio. I can highlight these bottom two, scoot it over a little bit in the timeline because you always want to start with your music first for a few seconds, and then your intro starts with your host speaking. So with that being said, I'm going to show you some things you can do with the sound, because this audio track of the background music is going to play over and on top of your voiceover. So listen to them together. So you notice that the voiceover is not as loud as the music is. So I'm going to click on this background music so that it's selected. And right here in the beginning of it, you're going to see this little sound icon. And when you see the sound icon, you have this bar that shows up, this blue bar, and it has a white little dot right here. But I can click on different spots within this and add additional dots and drag them to fade them out a little bit. And then I'm going to go over here towards the end where I'm doing the outro, and I want the music to start coming up at the end. And maybe another spot where we're going to let it finish with music. I'm going to move that slider again all the way over. and I'm going to cut the extra off that I don't need right there. We're just going to get rid of it. So you also need to encourage the kids to find some sound effects that enhance whatever they're talking about. So let's say we mentioned the word crickets in this audio somewhere. So I'm going to come over here in the timeline feature. I have this plus sign. I'm going to click on the plus sign, and I want to add in an additional audio track because I need it to layer and not cut into my background music, which is going to play throughout the voiceover. And you can name it crickets if I want to. I can just hit return or click add track. And you'll notice if I scroll down, I have a whole new timeline entry down here at the bottom. Again, I can go up to the search bar because I'm in the audio tab and I want to hear crickets. I can preview my sounds again. Here's crickets chirping. Right there. I like it. Maybe it happens about right here in my timeline. That's a lot of cricket noise. Maybe I just wanted to mention it real briefly, and I want to cut some of it out where it's not as loud. So I'm going to cut it there. I want to cut it there. And I'm going to click on this one. Now I'm going to delete. Click on this one, delete, move this over a little bit, exactly where I want it to be. And now we're going to, actually, my voice was super quiet when I did a playback, so I'm just going to raise the volume on it right there. I'm going to go to the beginning about right here so I don't waste your time, and I'm going to play that back. Tell kids to take a deep breath, and when you see that timer start ticking up, that's when they can start. We're going to scoot ahead a little bit. Listen to those crickets. They get a little nervous about it. They're going to make mistakes. Okay, so if that's where they want it to be, they're happy with their finished product. You notice my voice is dominant. It's what's in the forefront, and you hear a little bit of the background music. You hear the crickets just fine, but it doesn't drown my voice out. So you want to encourage kids to know how to balance that and make sure their voices are the forefront so you don't miss their content. Once they're finished, all they have to do is come up here, click Finish, give it a name. We're just going to call it Sample. And then click Set. And here's where they need to make some decisions. The best place and the only place for kids to send this is into Drive. So under Destinations, they want to click Google Drive right here. And then they come to this blue Export tab. And they click Export. It does a little cue. And it tells them they don't have to keep the window open. It's in the cloud, it's processing, and it's going to land in their drive. And let me show you where it lands. So I'm in my drive. It's not going to just randomly fall in there where you have to look it up. It's going to create a folder for them called WeVideo. So this is where all the videos and any podcasting that I've done inside of WeVideo, this is where it lands, and it'll land there for the kids too so they can find their project. So they just scroll down to find the name of their project. It may take a minute or two for it to process, and then they can drop it into whatever learning management system you want it to. And that is as simple as it is to create a podcast using WeVideo.